Docker's slogan is build, ship, and run any app anywhere. But what does that actually mean? Docker allows you to package up an application or service with all of its dependencies into a standardized unit. This unit is typically labeled as a Docker image. Everything that you need for that service to run is included, such as the code, runtime, system libraries, and anything else you would install on a server to make it run if you weren't using Docker. All of those components are layered on top of each other. Docker images are meant to be ran, and since everything is packaged together, you can be guaranteed that it will always run in the same way, regardless of where it's being ran. So what happens when you actually run a Docker image? It's important to understand the difference between a Docker image and Docker container. In the previous slide, we described what a Docker image is. When you run a Docker image, it creates a Docker container. If you're a developer, you can think of the image as a class, and the container is an instance of that class. A single Docker image can be ran multiple times, and each time that it's ran, it will produce a unique container that stands on its own. A virtual machine allows you to isolate resources in a similar fashion to a Docker container, but there's a few huge differences which make virtual machines much less efficient. Virtual machines require you to lug around an entire guest operating system for each app that you want to isolate. It can take many seconds to boot up a VM, and each one can potentially be gigabytes in size. Containers share your host operating system's kernel, and isolation is done using cgroups and other Linux kernel libraries. Docker is very lightweight. It typically takes 50 milliseconds for a container to start, and running a container doesn't use much disk space at all. The disk space is only used once for the Docker image. Docker containers are based on open standards. This means they run on all major Linux distributions and Windows operating systems. Containers isolate services from each other and are started with a restricted set of capabilities. All of the specs are open source, and there have been plenty of papers written on the topic, which I encourage exploring if you want to know the nitty and gritty details.